A new life makes its way into the world. A new beginning, a symbol of hope, a sign of spring. What better way to start the day? And as the sun dries the wet feathers of this little newborn, it transforms into an adorable fluffy chick. What a perfect way to start Springwatch.
And welcome to Springwatch 2022. It's the end of our first week, live from Wild Ken Hill on the northwest coast of Norfolk. I think we got off to quite a good start, some cracking programmes, plenty of action, a little bit of predation last night. Tonight, some amazing new science about an animal that we think we know quite well, the common toad, and also some startling views of the intimate anatomy of the heron. And don't worry, it's not inguinal anatomy that we're looking at tonight, it's buccal.
Let me tell you, there's been lots of action on our live nest over the last 24 hours, but I'm pleased to tell you it's not been so dramatic, it's nothing shocking, it's all really positive. So let's enjoy it, because this is what happened early this morning with our lapwings. Look at that, 5:34, just as I was waking up. I was actually,
Ridiculous.
I didn't sleep well. The lapwing comes in and settles down on the eggs, brooding away. 8:31, bit of movement, bit of fidgeting. The reason? The first chick is hatching. The chick comes out, those feathers are all wet. The adult takes the egg away, and quickly afterwards, that little chick dries out and is now all fluffy. So that's 1 out of the 4 eggs. We had to wait a little bit longer for the second egg to start pipping, and you can see the chicks out. So we've got 2 out of the 4 there, and you can see, did you see just on the end of its beak, little white egg tooth? And that egg tooth is used, you can see it there, it's used to break the egg sac, the air sac, and then to start chipping away at the egg. So that's 3 out of the 4. And then we had to wait, well, till this evening really, till just before 6 o'clock. And we saw the 4th egg start to pip. And when we started the programme, it hadn't quite hatched. But let's have a look at it live and see if there's been any progress. Well, we're not going to know, are we? Because the adult is sitting on the nest. She'll wait until all 4 chicks have hatched before she lets them all go off, although she'll probably brood them tonight because they can't regulate their own temperatures. So they do brood them, keep them warm, but then they'll all be off away from the nest and foraging. Adults stay with them for quite a few weeks though until they can fly. So we'll maybe have a look at them on Monday. Maybe they'll still be there.
Or if you're up early at 5:30 tomorrow morning, you could maybe have a look then.
No, seriously, I was up really early in the morning. It's not just hatching we've had fledging as well with our swallows. Now, this is a slightly smug face, Chris, a little bit smug, because, you know, I did say that I reckon they'd be gone by Thursday. And so let's see if I was right. Because this is what was happening in the barn an hour after I got up at 6:40, Chris. After I'd had some breakfast, lots of flapping with our swallow chicks in the barn. I mean, we've seen this for quite a few days. There's been a lot of flapping, a lot of flying around. They've got to get really strong. Because remember, you know, by September, by around that time, they'll be flying all the way to Africa. So it's important that those wings are strong. 4 out of the 5 of them had gone. One's left, thinking I might just snuggle down in that rather roomy nest now. Not for long though, by 7:32 it was off as well.
It's 2 hours after you've been up actually, isn't it?
2 hours after I've been up.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I'd done the washing, everything by then. Flying around in the barn, but very shortly after that, they all exited the barn and they all successfully fledged. Fantastic to see, so pay over your pound. Pay it over, come on.
No.
What?
Well, listen, when they fledge, they go out into the barn and they hop around on the rafters, okay?
Yeah,
but then they're going to go back to that
No,
nest.
but they didn't. They went.
No, I think
they went. I
probably
saw
have.
them go.
I tell you what, it's easily solved, isn't it? No, no, no. Let's go live.
No, let's not.
Let's go live to the barn now. Let's go live. Come on.
No.
Oh dear.
No. You've
Oh
let
dear.
me down, swallows. I thought you'd gone. But look, there's only 2. The rest are gone. 3 are gone.
That's a
There we
pile
go.
of 5.
You reckon?
And the pound remains firmly. Oh yeah, look.
No,
Yeah.
for
Can you
goodness
count?
Sake.
I know you've been up a long time, but surely you can still count to 5.
Yeah, you know what? They let me down every year, these swallows. I'm not going to befriend these swallows ever again.
In truth, they will be increasingly active now, and of course this is all about building up their confidence, flying from rafter to rafter, building up their strength in those flight muscles, and perhaps over the course of the weekend, 1 or 2 of them might go outside the barn, but I imagine they'll come back into the security of it. It's a top barn, by the way. That's not the only swallow's nest that we've got in there. We've got another swallow's nest. It's a little bit behind. We've been watching 5 eggs there, but then this morning, as Michaela was stirring in her cottage at about 8:46, we saw this. The adult female drops off, and there one of the eggs has hatched. She returns and diligently removes the egg shell, and here, look, 2 of them have hatched. Some birds will eat that shell to recover the calcium. Some will just take it as far as they can away from the nest so it doesn't draw attention to that nest to any passing predators. By 10:41, another one hatches. Off goes the shell. And we're watching these throughout the course of the day. Now, you might be thinking, why are the other ones fledging and these are only just hatching? Well, the adults could have arrived a bit later. There's something to worry about here. This isn't uncommon. They don't all nest exactly the same time, those species. It might have been a weather thing. Could have been anything. Anyway, let's go live to this now. We saw 4 had hatched. Can we see if the 5th has hatched? We can't, because the female is there, but I can tell you that we have been watching that nest, and that 5th egg is still unhatched at the moment. But what a view. Look at that, the colour on the top of that swallow's head.
Beautiful.
What a magnificent electric blue that is. Absolutely
Look at it. There we go.
sensational. Structural colour, no
my
pigment
gosh.
there. That's all to do with light passing through the feathers, but what a very, very, very beautiful bird. Fingers
Chris,
crossed the next one will hatch.
What can I make a bet with you on that one?
Oh, no,
Because
please.
I'll make a bet that they won't be gone, those chicks, by the end of the series.
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty safe with that one, aren't I?
We've also been watching another nest on the other side of the farm with 3 young. It's our Kestrel's nest. Let's go live to that Kestrel's nest now. Oh, what a view. Look at that. The setting sun on the broken bough of the old oak, and there, in the crack, you can see the young kestrels. The chamber that they were initially reared in. Oh, look, there's one at the bottom of the chamber there. And still got a bit of down on their head. So that's where the eggs were. That's where they were when they were youngsters, but they're becoming increasingly adventurous, and they are climbing up the gap in that tree. Here's the male bringing in a vole. Plenty of voles been coming in, pretty much a staple of the kestrel, really, the field vole. Although they will take a great range of prey, birds, reptiles, large insects. And the female comes in here. That looks like a shrew, common shrew that's going in there. Don't generally like eating those, the adults. Quite distasteful, but the chicks are going to tuck in. And there's the female feeding them. And look, one of the youngsters has started to think about branching, and it's made its way to the top of that crevice, but then it's changed its mind, and it hasn't yet got the dexterity to make a graceful re-entry into the nest chamber. But thankfully, it falls in the right direction and back into the security of that tree, which is fantastic. What a lovely nest that is.
It's really aesthetically pleasing, isn't it?
Lovely,
It's
yeah.
gorgeous.
Beautiful birds.
So we've had a lot of action down here at Wild Kenhill, but it's not all about the nests here at Norfolk and the wildlife. We've got Megs up in Northumbria at Kielder Forest. Megs, what have you got for us today?
Oh, well, I've got a really wonderful story, a bit of a comeback about one of our favourite mammals. Now, of course, ecology in the environment is always changing, and with climate change, we know that we can expect more extreme weather events more frequently. And when Storm Arwen hit last November, it devastated parts of Northumberland and the northeast, and lots of trees fell victim to it. I went to look at some of those trees earlier on. Now this is a Sitka spruce. It is a non-native and it's estimated to be about 75 years old. I'm about 5.4 foot and this root plate stands at 25 foot tall and the entire tree is about 10 foot. But what you'll notice is that it's got really shallow roots. And this of course makes it susceptible to storm damage because the roots don't go down, they go out to the side. And all across Kielder, there was 4,000 acres of damage throughout Storm Arwen. But of course, where there's devastation, there's some opportunity because those non-natives have fallen down. That potentially gives opportunity for native regeneration to come back in and also to provide a home for more species. Those tall spruces aren't necessarily that biodiverse, but that root system could now be home and feed lots of different insects and lots of different fungus as well. And also, one of the most rare mammals that we have in the UK, the gorgeous pine marten. Now there's estimated to be somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 of these across the UK. And there were rumours for ages thinking that pine martens might have crossed the border from their stronghold into Scotland, into Kielder, but it wasn't confirmed until 2018 when some camera footage was showing pine martens were officially back. What a gorgeous animal it is, and so wonderful to have it back after 90 years. But they are still an incredibly new population. We're still understanding how they're impacting the forest here. So naturalists have gone out and put trail cameras all around to understand a bit more about the pine marten's movements. This footage was captured by Ken Scrimger. And what you're seeing here is pine marten scent marking. Now they do this to communicate. There's not many individuals, we think, here. We don't know exactly how many, but by putting scratch down, they're essentially communicating with one another about resources, about territories, and of course about mating as well. Look at that, how cute. Supposedly though, scrats are meant to smell like Parma violets. You remember those 90s sweets? I mean, I've smelled a few scrats in my time. They don't smell anything like Parma violets. They smell a little bit more like exactly what they eat. And pine martens are a generalist feeder. They'll take opportunities from wherever they can find them. Small mammals, for example. They might even take beetles and invertebrates. But sometimes if they can find it, they will also take eggs. And out, obviously, with camera traps, it's nice to lure them in to figure out how many there are. So here were a few eggs left for the pine marten. It's using its keen sense of smell to find the eggs there. But what amazes me is look at the jaw. How quickly, how far that jaw opens, and it's taken off a huge hit of protein and lots of nutrients ingested in that. And what I've got in my hand here is actually a tawny owl egg that has been predated by a pine marten. And if you look really carefully, you can see the tooth marks of where that pine marten delicately put its teeth to carry it off. And if I turn it around, this is where it entered the egg to get out all the yolk and the nutrients that it can find. Now there's a study going on here in Kielder which is looking at how these predators are affecting the ecology of non-native woodland. And I'd argue, because there's not many natural cavities in non-native spruce, that actually they're having to put a lot of bird boxes up to encourage nesting birds, that maybe pine martens here are feeding more on birds' eggs than they would anywhere else. However, whilst it's not good news for necessarily the birds in the nest boxes, it is really good news for red squirrels, because pine martens naturally co-evolved with red squirrels and actually outcompete the greys. So it's really good news for our red squirrels. But Yolo, over to you in Mull. What do you think of this? This is my tawny owl egg bitten by a pine marten. Have you ever seen one of those?
Yeah, that is lovely, Meg. I have to say, no, I've never seen a tawny owl egg predated by a pine marten, but a friend of mine used to monitor barn owls on the borders in Dumfries and Galloway, and the main predator of his barn owl eggs was pine marten. And it's funny you should mention tawny owl, because I was going through the footage from our cairn cam, a camera we have on a cairn, a pile of rocks, up on the moors here this morning, and we found a tawny owl on it. Now this was unexpected. I know a tawny owl is a common and widespread bird, but the cairn and that camera are right out on the moor, a long way from the nearest woodland, and we always think of tawny owls as being a woodland owl. Now an owl that's far more at home out on the moors here is the short-eared owl, and Mull is a real stronghold for this bird. Beautiful bird. Our most diurnal owl, out hunting in daylight, long wing, light colour and those lovely lemon eyes as well. And as Meg's told us the other day, numbers fluctuate with vole numbers. Voles are their chief prey, and vole numbers we know go in cycles of about 4 years. Well, so do the numbers of these owls. But what's interesting here on Mull, I was talking to the bird recorder, he said they haven't had a good vole here for about a decade, but he thinks 2022 this year is a good vole year, so it should be a good year up here for short-eared owls as well. Now, surprisingly perhaps, we also have a close cousin of the short-eared owl up here, the long-eared owl. And I always think of this as being strictly nocturnal woodland bird, but not on Mull. Up here, it can be seen in daylight out on the moors. Look at that, much darker than the short-eared owl, rusty orange colour, and those orangey eyes as well. Now, back home in Wales, it's very much a bird of coniferous woodland. Comes out after dark, very, very nocturnal, difficult to find, very elusive as well, but here it is, hunting in daylight. Also a barn owl, exactly the same location, 2 owls for the price of 1. Look at that. How often do you get a view with a barn owl and a long-eared owl in it? Not often. And of course, barn owls are after the same thing. They're after the voles in that moorland, and plenty of nest sites for barn owls here in the form of old buildings, old barns, cliffs with fissures and caves in them, and they coexist quite happily there. Now, on the mainland, these owls tend to show niche separation. In other words, they're separated partly by habitat use. But here on Mull, let me show you, things are a little bit different. Right, on the mainland, you would expect to find barn owl, for example, wildflower meadow on farmland. You'd expect to find a tawny owl mainly in deciduous or mixed woodland. Long-eared owl, for me in Wales at least, is a coniferous woodland, strictly nocturnal species. And the short-eared owl, diurnal, hunts by day out over the moor. But here on Mull, it's a little bit different. You get the tawny owls, yes, they're found in woodland here, but they're also found on woodland edges, hunting out over the moor. Same goes for the long-eared owl. We saw these earlier, hunting out over the open moor. And they share that habitat with the barn owl, which is not so much a farmland bird here as a lowland, moorland, vole-rich area bird. Isn't that fantastic? There's also one other owl I should mention, not here on Mull, but about 100 miles northwest of here on St Kilda. Over there at the moment, they have a snowy owl, a female snowy owl. She's been there since 2019, and they've named her Snedge. Now, don't forget, snowy owls nested on Fettler up in Shetland in the late 60s and the early 70s. So if Snedge can find a mate, well, you never know. It's that time of year now, isn't it? It's spring. I can feel my sap rising, and everyone's thoughts are turning towards mating. But for some, the journey to mate is a long and a perilous one.
The course is set. The end goal, the lake. Sunset is the starting gun for the tough mudder of amphibians, toads. The terrain is a man-made obstacle course. Concrete monoliths need to be navigated. Stone steps must be climbed. But these toads are being driven by the most basic of instincts, the need to breed. Winter has been spent in these woodlands, but with temperatures on the rise and dampness in the air, it's the toad's cue to commence. For this competitor, a human hurdle stands in her way. She doesn't compete in the high jump, but free climbing is a skill she has mastered. She grasped the textured surface with her 4-toed front feet, pulling herself up. Some obstacles are not so easy to navigate. her journey is fraught with danger. This time, it's a road that crosses her route. And cars can be lethal. Toads prefer to walk rather than hop, so getting out of the way of an approaching vehicle isn't easy. Toad numbers have declined by 68%, so every casualty counts. Thankfully here, there are helping hands to even out the odds. The Shalcombe Toad Rescue Group.
I'm here to walk up and down the road with my torch to look for toads and help them over the road. Here we are, I've got one. I think it's a girl. People generally think, they're slimy, they're horrible. They're adorable, and I've always loved them ever since I was a kid. There we are. I think they're just such a beautiful animal.
At this site, we've got maybe 50 volunteers, and some of them are coming out nearly every night. The things with toads is they prefer to go back to the same pond each year, so they go back to their breeding pond. Maybe for hundreds of years they've been migrating that route, but if we stick a road in the way, suddenly there's cars going across, and so we do get a lot of squashed toads on the roads. We're over 700 so far this year that have actually been physically picked up and moved across just at this particular site, and it makes a massive difference.
So you're just going to continue on your journey, little one. Here we are. When you've helped a little toad across the road, it just feels really lovely because you just feel like you've hopefully helping it on the way to go to breed and then to help the next lot of toads to be born.
The finish line is in sight. She's on the home stretch. But she's been spotted by a smaller male waiting on the sideline. For him, this isn't a spectator sport. He gives chase. It's a warm embrace for the female. He has a game plan. If he can be with her as she enters the water, he'll be the first to pass on his genes. But for her, it's an extra load to bear. Using the last of her reserves, she crosses the finish line. At last, she can release her spawn. And for the male, fertilisation is the prize. The trophy, string-like structures with the next generation of tough mudders developing inside.
Look at all this spawn.
Oh, yeah!
It's spawn central over here.
There's quite a lot more toad spawn than there was before.
So seeing lots more spawn than I've seen for years, actually, so really heartening to see such a lot.
They like to sort of swirl it around the vegetation.
Yeah, they like to kind of hang it around it, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
It feels like all these weeks are going out in the dark and the rain and the cold and not being able to go out with your friends or go out for dinner or anything like that. It's worth it. This is the result, and it's worth every night of that.
So this time next year?
This time next year, I'll see you down a dark lane soon.
Absolutely.
I love that toad enthusiasm and that community getting together. You know, there's volunteers looking after those toads. Great way of getting engaged and good, practical, local conservation in action. Top work. But the toad is one of those animals that lives pretty much all over the UK, not the Isle of Man, Northern Ireland, but the mainland of the UK. And it's a creature that we think we know well. I've got a question for you.
Go on then.
How old do you think the oldest common toad
Lived for? I say 20 years.
No. There was a toad in Hull called Georgie. It was taken to a garden in 1973 and lived there until it was at least 38 years old. And it was already an adult, so they can live to 40 years or more.
Really?
I know, it's amazing, isn't it?
Didn't realise that.
Absolutely amazing. But there's always new things to learn about species that live around us. And now we've got some cracking new science about toads.
And this new science was actually found by chance by researchers that were doing surveys on bats and dormice. Now, just think about that. Where would you look for bats and dormice? Where do you do your surveys? You do them up trees. Now, toads, ground-dwelling creatures. So how did they discover anything about them? Well, just take a look at what they saw. While they were doing their surveys, they saw a toad up a tree in a crevice. Not only that, when the dormice researchers were looking for their dormice, they found a toad in a dormouse nest box. And what I love about this information is it's collaborative. Lots of people working together that shared that info. And there's loads of people. The National Dormouse Monitoring Project, the Battery Habitat Key Project, researchers from Cambridge University, Frog Life, People's Trust for Endangered Species, all working together. And that's what they saw, new science.
Toads up trees.
Toads up trees.
And we've got this photograph. This was sent to us by Silvio Petrovan. He's the lead researcher in the research that we're talking about, based at Cambridge University. Look, here's the tree. The red rectangle delineates where the hole is. The photograph of a hole there, and there's the toad that was in it. Now, on average, the toads were found 134 centimetres up the tree, but some of them scaled 3 metres. And there you can see that was a mossy tree, so perhaps they were able to scramble up the moss. And remember, toads are a walking, ground-based amphibian. They don't have any adaptations for tree climbing. So getting up to 3 metres means that they seriously want to get up there for some reason.
And this isn't just a one-off random thing that a couple of researchers saw. If we go over to the map, you can see 50 records of this. And there's probably lots more because, let's face it, when you're doing any sort of surveying of toads, you're not looking up trees. I bet people will start looking now.
Well, they should look looking now. The question is, though, why? We've got to answer this question. Why would a toad want to go up a tree? Michaela, can you help me by being a bit toady?
I can, because I've actually
I know
got...
you can, because you've been toady for about the last 25
I've got
years.
a toad attached to my back, so I will be your toad. Oh, what did you say?
Nothing,
That's so
forget
rude.
it. Move on swiftly. OK, why would they want to climb the tree? Hold on, before you ascend.
OK.
The first thing is that they might be avoiding predators. And when you think about the predators they have, grass snakes eat lots of frogs and toads. Toads sort of inflate themselves. They blow themselves up to try and discourage the snakes from being able to swallow them. Polecats and otters have developed techniques for eating toads. Toads have sort of distasteful toxic skin, and otters have learned to be able to split that skin and almost turn the toad inside out so they can eat them. So they may want to get off the ground to avoid other ground-based animals, particularly those predators.
If I'm a toad, I don't want to be turned inside out, so
climb
I'm
the
definitely
tree, ascend the tree.
gonna
What do
get
you find,
away.
Michaela, slightly further up?
Oh, I find some food. You know what? I quite fancy a bit of a slug. And I think I might have that spider too. Thanks very much. That was a bit opportunistic.
Could they be climbing the trees to find food? Well, when there are drought conditions and it's very dry on the ground, perhaps those holes in the trees are pockets of moisture where some of the toad's invertebrate food might be hiding out. But then you would think they might go up there, get the food and then get back down again. Why would they actually stay there? Michaela, if you climb a little bit higher...
Oh, I think I found somewhere
And
quite...
I've got to say at this point, there's a certain generation of formerly young men, now middle-aged men, that have waited years for this view, to be quite honest with you. But anyway, let's move swiftly on. They could be ascending the tree to avoid parasites. Parasites. This parasite in particular, this little fly is a thing called the toad fly. I know it looks like a fly you might find on your cake or buzzing around your lampshade, but it's a particularly hideous parasite. Now, we're about to show you a clip which is slightly distasteful. So if you're eating, I suggest you stop, and if you're particularly sensitive, I suggest you turn away momentarily. The fly lays its eggs on the toad. They hatch into maggots, and the maggots migrate to the nostrils and the eyes of the toad, where they begin to consume its living flesh. And they continue to eat it until the toad is blind. The toad then makes its way into open country where it's further attacked by blowflies until eventually those maggots have eaten all of its head. Here's a photograph of a toad that's been almost completely gutted by these maggots. They then pupate. The pupae drop onto the ground and they emerge a few weeks later to start the whole process over again. And there can be 3 broods of these toad flies every year. Now, what we don't know at the moment is whether the toad flies are looking for their host along the ground and not up the tree. So it could be that the toads are ascending the trees to avoid those hideous parasitic toad flies.
That was like a horror movie, and my toad has been scared by that, so my toad is going in the hole. But you know, it is absolutely fascinating information, and it is new science that was accidentally found. So if you happen to see any amphibians, frogs and toads up trees, then Frog Life would love to know about it, so please get in contact with them. All the details are on our website. But as I say, that was what?
I was meant to hold the ladder.
Oh,
health and safety.
Yeah, well, a bit late now, isn't it? It's a little bit late now. But that image of a toad, oh my goodness, I think we all just need to get that image out of our heads now. So let's go up to Megan in Kielder, and I really hope she's got something more beautiful to show us.
Yes, Michaela, that was a little bit on the gruesome side, wasn't it? But I have to say, still equally fascinating behaviour. Now, last night, the team were quite busy doing one of my favourite activities. It was something I did all the time as a kid. In fact, I even had a birthday party structured around it, a bit of moth trapping, and I wanted to show you what we found. Look at this. This is a poplar hawk moth, named because the larvae eat poplar, of course, and it's one of our most common hawk moth species. Look how gorgeous it is. Absolutely stunning. And we've got so much moth biodiversity here in the UK. We've got 2,500 different species, all different sizes, all different colours, living in all different environments. And here in Kielder, it is fantastic for insects because it's also famous for its gorgeous night skies as well. And I love nothing more than looking up at the stars above, wondering what's out there. There's 580 square miles of land with very little light pollution here. And shockingly, I was really surprised to find out that fewer than 85% of people in the UK are believed to have seen a true dark night sky. Fewer than 85%. There's something really sad about that. And of course, it's all because of anthropogenic light pollution, the light that we pump out into the atmosphere. Something which, of course, is going to affect biodiversity, and we're beginning to understand more about this as time goes on. And in terms of moths, we know that there's about 40% decline, especially in the south of England. And in the 20th century alone, we know we've lost 60 species of moths to extinction. This one's still warming up and will be released shortly, I can promise you. But of course, there's lots of different things that we can do. And our streets are full of street lamps, of course, and these are incredibly bright for moth species. Here we've got some LED lights, and look at all the insects around that. They're attracted to high intensity lights, especially lights that are on all the time. And the problem that we see with this, of course, is that it affects the insect's internal clock. These moths have a very specific clock inside them. It tells them when to breed, when to feed, and it's all to do with light and temperature cues. And if those temperature and light cues are off, then it can mess up their entire cycle. And of course, lots of things feed on moths. So if their cycles are off, then so are the predators that feed on them as well. But here in Kielder, because they are some beautiful night skies, there are also ways to reduce the light pollution, and they've been taking some of those on board. You can actually put a hood on top of a light, and what this does is it angles the light downwards instead of pushing it up into the atmosphere. They also make the light quite a warm hue, reducing that intensity and increasing the natural behaviour of the moths around them, which is something we can all take a note to do, because we know more and more that it's affecting lots of insects, not just moths. So it's fantastic work from Kielder. Now, I'm really sad to say it's my last night here in Kielder, and I have had the most amazing time getting to know all the biodiversity here. Some of my favourites, though, have to be the osprey. So let's go and have one last check on how they're doing, shall we? Let's have a look. This is our reservoir nest. Look, some feeding going on there, and you can see the chicks poking out. How adorable is that? So tender. Let's have a look at our forest with our famous male YA. A bit of incubation, well, not incubation, but keeping the chicks nice and warm under there. But even in the few days that we've been here, we have seen huge progression in the chicks' development. This is when we first arrived. Look at how young those chicks are. You've got the male YA at the back and the female delicately feeding the chicks. And here, there's still 4 chicks there, I promise you, it's just 2 are out of sight. But look at that bold chick, taking some of its first steps out to the edge of the nests, having a look at the wide world, and very soon it's going to be soaring in the skies above. What a fantastic note to lead Kilda on. Now it's time for me to pack up my bags and tie up my shoelaces, because I'm going to be moving towards the coast to Hawksley Nature Reserve, seeing all the biodiversity that lives there. Lots of fantastic stories that I can't wait to share with you. And amongst those is one of my favourite birds. They're a bit clumsy, they're really funny, and they're rather adorable, but I won't wait to share them with you. They are, of course, the iconic Puffin. Just a mile off the coast of Pembrokeshire, Scomer Island takes on a life of its own in spring. In early April, the previously peaceful island becomes a little less so, as it transforms into one of the most important seabird breeding sites in southern Britain. Guillemots, razorbills and Manx shearwaters flock to the island in huge numbers to make the most of the rich waters and craggy cliffs. Amongst the new black and white colour scheme, a flash of orange beaks can be seen making their way to shore. Puffins spend the winter months at sea, but return here to breed. And in spring, Scomer becomes home to around 6,000 pairs. But their sights aren't set on the cliffs. These pairs will use burrows to lay their eggs, returning to the same spot every year. But after lying empty over winter, they just need a quick spring clean. This female and male have reunited at their burrow. And what a better way to re-establish your bond than with a bit of beak rubbing. The colour of their beaks is a seasonal special. They lose the orange finery with blue and white streaks once the breeding season is over. But for now, they are the tender tools of affection. Between reacquainting rituals, puffins need to feed. And the waters around Scomer are rich with prey. The puffin's short wings and legs make for a clumsy landing. But they are perfectly adapted for a life under the water. Moving with speed and deadly precision to catch a bounty of small fish and sand eels. Once they've had their fill, it's time to get back to the burrow. But making it back to land doesn't mean they're safe. Predators prowl the skies. The mighty wingspans of the greater blackback gulls soar overhead. Huge in comparison, with large, sharp beaks, they are the perfect puffin predator. A lucky escape. For those that successfully run the gauntlet, there is a reward. the chance to mate and rear their young. Females will lay one single egg in their burrow. Both male and female will take turns to incubate until, with some luck and a fair wind, another generation of puffins will make their way out of the burrows and out to the Atlantic once more.
I do like a puffin, and I like a puffling even more, I've got to say, but whenever I see puffins like that, I always think back to a trip I made to some of the outer isles here about 5 years ago to watch puffins, and I was sat there watching one. All of a sudden, shadow came in over my shoulder like this, took out the puffin and swallowed it whole. It was a great black-backed gull. But of course, that's what gulls do. Gulls are opportunists, and that includes your chip-stealing herring gull. Out there in the wild, they do exactly the same thing. Here's one approaching a guillemot colony. There's obviously food there. It comes down, picks it up. It's a sand eel that's been dropped by one of the adult guillemots. It's easy food and low risk for that gull. So that means that the seabirds out here, they've got to be on high alert constantly. But sometimes even that isn't enough, especially when they come up against the biggest gull in the world, the great black-backed gull. Now this bird is a real brute. And here's one. It's found an easy target, a lone nesting guillemot. It must be a young bird. Drags it away by the wing, just drags it off its egg there, walks around nonchalantly, picks up the egg, knowing full well that that is packed full of nutrients. No risk at all to the gull. The guillemot is a third of its size. And here's another one here now on the edge of a loose colony. Again, an easy target on the outside there. These will be young, inexperienced birds. Same technique, drags it off by the wing, pulls it away until the egg is exposed. And then, once again, it takes its time. It walks around and picks up the egg, and off it goes. If you're a young, inexperienced bird on the outside of that colony there, you're in trouble. So we've seen now that it's high risk if you're a guillemot, if you're nesting by yourself or on the edge of a colony. So what is the answer? Well, the answer is simple. You nest right in the middle of a dense colony. And scientists have looked at this, and they've discovered that guillemots, on average, their nesting density is 20 pairs per metre squared. And what you've got to remember is they don't need much room, because there's no nest. It's just an egg laid on a rock. That's all it is. So how on earth, let's say you're a guillemot, you've gone out to sea, you've come back with your fish, and in front of you, 10,000 guillemots. How on earth do you find your partner in the middle of that lot? Well, scientists have looked into this as well. And what they found is that 75% of returning birds land precisely alongside their mate. So they know exactly where they're going. And what they believe is that the birds primarily use visual clues to locate their nest site. So they're building up a mental map of things like rock formations, rock colour and so on, so that they remember where it is. And this means that the guillemots are able to return to exactly the same breeding spot in successive years. And there's been some fantastic research done on the Isle of May, which shows that 91% of the guillemots bred within 5 centimetres of the location they bred in the previous year. Isn't that incredible? And bear in mind, these are long-lived birds, so they will come back year after year to almost exactly the same spot on that rock. But not all seabirds use visual clues. Other birds use different clues to find and to choose a mate as well. Let's look at the kittiwake, another cliff nesting bird, of course. And when they groom, they spread odorous chemical compounds throughout their plumage. And these odours, the cocktail is unique to every individual. and related individuals produce similar preen gland chemicals, and therefore they smell more similar to each other. And because kittiwakes prefer to mate with unrelated partners, well, they pick them by smell. Can you imagine that, picking your partner by smell? I tell you what, if my wife would have followed these rules, no way would she have married me. I tell you that now. Now let's go back to our puffins. Everyone's favourite seabird, the puffin. Beautiful birds, they all look alike to us, of course. So how do puffins find their partners? Well, I'm pleased to tell you that we simply don't know. And Chris and Michaela down there in Norfolk, do you know what? It's brilliant. So much research going on these seabirds now, finding out so many new science, new answers to everything. For someone who's not very bright like me, it's brilliant that we still don't know everything. Isn't that great?
It is. It's not what we do know that's most exciting when you've got an interest in natural history. It's what you don't know. And if you have that interest, you know it's going to last you a lifetime. There's so much to learn. Toads up trees, kittiwakes smelling different. It's amazing.
I know, and talking of things you don't know, do you know, I've never seen a puffin in winter when they lose the colour on their beak and it goes quite dull.
It goes brown, yeah, and their feet. And their feet
obviously
as well.
they're out to sea, so the chances of
I've
seeing
seen them. You
are
typically
small.
see them dead on the beach.
Oh no, well I don't want to see that.
No, you don't want to see them dead on the beach, but I mean, normally they're way out at sea, so you only do see them if they're dead on the beach. Yeah, move on.
One of my favourite birds, puffins, but let's have a look at one of my favourite birds here. It's provided us with so much entertainment. Our Heron Nest. Let's see them live. 3 chicks there. Oh, they look a bit fed up, don't they? But, you know, they're full of character. They're 52 days old, 53 days old, actually, and so they could be going. One of them has been going quite a lot.
I don't want to bet.
No, we're not going to bet. Look at these, though. This is what we've been seeing them do. They're sunbathing, a bit like cormorants. They're sort of spreading their wings out, heating up, drying off. But this is when it all goes pear-shaped. The adult comes in and it's just mayhem at feeding time. You've got to feel sorry for that adult because the chicks aren't nearly as big as it and it's stretching its head up so that those chicks can't quite reach it as it regurgitates the food to feed it to the 3 hungry chicks. And oh my goodness, look at the way they
just
destroy it. You've got to feel sorry for that adult. Just listen to them. So much bickering going on. There are no table manners in this particular nest. And we saw yesterday, they're fighting over an eel, they're fighting over a rat, they're fighting over birds. Everyone's out for whatever they can get. I love the manic look in their eyes.
Oh dear, it is quite grotesque, isn't it, that nest, but fascinating. And of course our cameras allow us to see these birds in a way that we perhaps wouldn't normally. And therefore we can identify little things which raise questions, like this. Look at the mouth of this heron. Now it's gaping. It could be that it's hot, trying to lose heat. It could be that it's eaten more than its fill, or it could be that it's about to regurgitate a pellet. But look just behind the protruding tongue. That opening is its glottis. That's the entrance to its trachea, its windpipe going down into its lungs. So that's odd, isn't it? The entrance to the windpipe is right there in its beak, whilst its esophagus, the entrance to the stomach, is at the back of its neck, quite the opposite from ours. Obviously, ours are pretty close together here in our throat. But then we've got quite short throats, and the heron has a much longer neck here, throat going all the way down to its stomach. So if I perform a little bit of sort of cardboard dissection of the heron here, and remove the outer covering of the bird, here we see the spine, the neck, that long, flexible neck of the heron. Here we see the esophagus, where the food passes down into the stomach, and here the trachea, where air is drawn into the lungs, and they are separate entrances. And it could be that this is advantageous given that that neck wants to be supremely flexible. And it's not just when they're stretching up to swallow food, it's when they're catching their food. If you watch herons hunting, they draw their neck back and then they thrust their skull and beak forward to grab their prey. So it could be that this is the reason why that trachea is right at the front of the mouth. Or another theory, think about snakes swallowing their food. It takes them a long time to swallow very large prey items, and in order to do that without suffocating, they push their trachea to the side of their mouth. So they're still breathing whilst they're spending hours sometimes swallowing their food. Could it be, and we've seen these animals swallowing large eels, birds, rats, whole, that it would be advantageous for them to have that tracheal opening in the front so that it's not blocking their, or getting blocked when they're swallowing things down their esophagus? Well, in America, the great blue heron, grey heron as we know it here, has been found to have suffocated swallowing large lampreys, fish, long and thin, quite like eels, and two of them were found close together. The lampreys had been dead, but the scientists thought that those birds had actually choked because they were so big they were blocking that glottis in the heron's mouth.
Well, it's really interesting to see that because, do you know, I've volunteered at a seabird rescue centre and I've had to tube feed cormorant chicks that were abandoned, and they don't have an obvious trachea, and so it's quite nerve-wracking getting the tube down to make sure that you don't get it down the trachea, that you get it down the other tube and goes into its stomach. Very stressful.
But that's interesting because cormorants are another species of bird which follow their prey whole, often large fish, and we've all seen our cormorants struggling to get, you know, very large mullet and eels down their throat. So there's more to it than that, and it's another question that's not been wholly answered. But we can continue to pontificate about it.
Time for a mindful moment though. Time to take the stress away, take a deep breath in and enjoy the beauty of the coast of Cornwall.
Bit of bliss, but let's get back to the bustle of our live cameras here at Wild Ken Hill. Let's go live to our barn owl, which is over here on the other side of the farm. See what's going on inside that nest box now. There's the exit outside. That's the barn where they're nesting. They're in an artificial box that's been put up for them, and we've got 5 youngsters inside. At the moment, they're all huddled together in anticipation of a fest of food that will be brought in during the course of the night when the barn owls are doing most of their hunting. Now, if you look in the foreground, you'll see that one of them, as is typical, is smaller than the others. And here it's struggling to swallow that small mammal whole. The others are already swallowing things whole, so it's getting a bit left behind. Thankfully, the adult tears up one of the cached small mammals and gives it a, well, not a small mouthful, still a nevertheless large mouthful, but the wide gape of the barn owl manages to swallow that. I wonder where its tracheal opening is, given that it's swallowing something like that. Here again, look, it's trying to swallow a mammal whole, but it doesn't manage to do so before one of its siblings steals it and, look, has no problem swallowing that. Now, we know that this is a strategy to ensure survival of the first hatch and therefore often the fittest chick. But look, here's the little one on the left-hand side. And after a bit of a struggle, I'm pleased to say that it is now capable of swallowing a vole whole. And a magnificent exit by the adult bird. Oh my goodness, look at that for a scene. Honestly, it's like a painting, isn't it, really?
That is absolutely glorious, isn't it? Should we check in on our marsh harriers quickly? They're over there on the marsh, as you'd expect. Let's have a look at them live. Oh, what a beautiful shot. Look at that.
That
on the nest.
Unbelievable. We've
got 3 chicks. And here you've got the 3 chicks. You could see the difference in size. Probably hatched about 2 days apart. And then you've got the female parachuting down. And again, they've been fed with all sorts of prey. We saw yesterday that food pass that the male does to the female. And she brings the food in. Male tends to stay away from the nest. Although sometimes he does drop down and you can see her looking up. And that's him dropping down, literally just putting the prey down and then flying straight off. Fantastic to see that, absolutely lovely. And we will, of course, be checking in with our marsh harriers next week. Because unfortunately, that's it, that's the end of our first week. It's been real rock and roll, hasn't it? We've had so much beauty, so much wildlife, so much science. We've had lots of firsts to the watchers as well. But don't worry, we've got a great week for you next week. Just have a look.
This year, the most exciting thing happened.
Gosh, I can see a seal.
It looks pretty good to me. If I wasn't presenting it, I'd be watching it, wouldn't you? I'd book a place on my sofa Monday at 8 o'clock on BBC Two.
Because you'd be up by then, wouldn't you?
I'd be up by then.
Yeah.
And there's so much more as well. I'll tell you what, we've got some pretty awesome stuff with badgers, a badger bonanza, and another first for the watchers. That's all I'm going to say, but it's pretty special.
I'm going to be continuing my mull adventure and catching up with the white-tailed eagles.
I'll be moving over to Hawksley Nature Reserve and getting to know some of the residents, like these red squirrels.
Hannah Stitfall will be on at 1 o'clock on our social media platforms on Monday, so you can find that on Facebook and all of the others. She'll be joined by Yolo Williams for a bit of lunchtime fun, frolics and answering your questions. If you see anything whilst you're out and about this weekend, we'd love to see it too, so do post it on our Twitter, Facebook or Instagram pages. We'll try and find that. And of course, we'll be back next week, Monday, 8 o'clock. In the meantime, if you happen to be up a tree and sticking your nose into a hole, let everyone know if you find a toad. See you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
To find out more about uncovering urban wildlife and about how regenerative farming affects our countryside, go to bbc.co.uk/Springwatch and follow the links to the Open University.